What if the secret to completely, overhauling your cardiovascular system, dropping body fat, and increasing your overall body strength by upwards of 40% didn't involve a treadmill at all?
Right, or heavy weights for that matter.
Exactly. What if it just involved a painted square on the ground, a basketball, and a very specific set of spatial rules?
It sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually grounded in reality.
It is. That is the exact premise we are exploring today, and it is based on a truly fascinating piece of research. We're doing a deep dive into a rigorously controlled study titled Comparative Effects of 1v1 vs 3v3 Small-Sided Basketball Training on Body Anthropometric-Related Outcomes and Physical Fitness in Sedentary Female College Students. An 8-week randomized controlled trial.
Quite a mouthful, but a very important paper.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to make sure I get all the authors here because they did incredible work. It was authored by Lu Li, Xinjie, Jiawei Chen, Qingpan, Gustavo de Conti, Teixeira, Costa, Robert Trybulski, and Filipe Manuel Clemente, and is published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine in 2026, Volume 25.
Yeah, the mission of this deep dive today is to really explore exactly how manipulating the structural constraints of a simple game can trigger these profound physiological adaptations in completely inactive young adults.
Right.
Because it's a critical area of study. It precisely bridges that gap between recreational play and clinical exercise science. So what we are examining here is the concept of small-sided games, or SSGs.
All right, SSGs.
Yeah, and in the academic realm, an SSG is not just, a casual pickup game at the park. It is a highly engineered environment where researchers manipulate fundamental task constraints. So things like the number of people involved, the duration of the effort, or, the exact square footage of the play area.
This is wild to think about.
It really is. They do it to force a specific biological response. So we are looking at how human physiology adapts when it's basically forced to solve a dynamic, constantly changing physical puzzle.
I like to think of this deep dive as a look at the ultimate fitness Trojan horse. It's basically a method of sneaking highly potent clinical-grade conditioning into an activity that your brain simply registers as play.
I love that analogy. It's so true.
But before we get to the actual data, we need to establish why this research is so necessary right now. The researchers specifically targeted sedentary female college students. So what is driving the focus on that particular demographic?
Well, it comes down to a highly documented, really alarming shift in global physical behavior. When young adults transition from high school into university life, we consistently observe a massive, precipitous drop in structured physical activity.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right, because they are moving away from mandatory physical education or organized club sports. And suddenly, their primary daily requirement involves sitting in lecture halls or hunched over laptops for hours.
It's totally inactive.
Exactly. And the metabolic consequences of this are severe. We are seeing early onset cardiometabolic decline, poorer lipid profiles, rising subcutaneous adiposity, and a general degradation of aerobic capacity in populations that historically should be at their physical peak.
Right. Your late teens and early 20s.
Yeah.
And the standard medical advice for this is usually something incredibly uninspiring, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's usually a prescription to go jog on a treadmill for 30 minutes a day at a steady pace, which, relies entirely on raw willpower. It's like eating plain broccoli. It's good for you, but it's really hard to stick with for a sedentary person.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't already enjoy running, staring at the timer on a treadmill while your lungs burn requires this massive cognitive effort to sustain. The willpower reservoir depletes very quickly, which is why adherence to those programs is pretty much universally terrible.
That is the crux of the issue right there. Traditional steady-state cardio requires you to actively focus on the discomfort of the exertion. Small-sided games, though, they're like hiding the broccoli in a delicious pasta sauce. They bypass that cognitive barrier entirely.
I love that. Hiding the broccoli.
Right. In sports science, we measure the physical demands of an activity through two distinct metrics. You have internal load and external load.
Okay, break those down for us.
Sure. So internal load refers to the physiological stress inside your body. That's your heart rate spiking, the accumulation of blood lactate, or even just your subjective perception of how hard you are breathing.
How miserable you feel.
Basically, yeah. And then external load is the mechanical work you are actually outputting, the total meters sprinted, the number of heart accelerations, the physical jumps you do.
Okay, got it.
In a small-sided game, your external load is dictated by the objective of the game. You are sprinting to block a shot or accelerating to get open. Your attention is entirely externalized onto the ball and the opponent.
So you are basically tolerating a much higher internal load, like a higher heart rate and more lactate, because your brain is too distracted by the game to tell you to stop.
Exactly. The perception of effort is totally masked by the cognitive demands of strategy and reaction. Which brings us to the core of how you actually test this phenomenon in a scientifically valid way.
Right, because basketball is inherently chaotic. I mean, you're trying to measure precise physiological adaptations. How do you prevent the sheer randomness of a game from destroying your data?
This is a huge challenge.
But the researchers constructed this incredibly tight 8-week randomized controlled trial to solve it. So they recruited 63 female college students between the ages of 18 and 21. And a really vital detail here, these women had absolutely no systematic basketball background.
Total novices.
Right. They were complete novices who were clinically categorized as sedentary. And they were split evenly into 3 groups of 21. You had a one-on-one training group, a 3-on-3 training group, and a control group that simply maintained their normal inactive lifestyle.
And the training intervention itself was highly standardized. The experimental groups trained 3 times a week for exactly 60 minutes per session. But the architecture of that hour is what's really important here.
Yeah, tell us about that hour.
It was not just 60 minutes of continuous running. It involved a 10-minute standardized warm-up, followed by 4 distinct 8-minute bouts of actual gameplay.
Okay.
Crucially, between each of those 8-minute bouts, the participants were given precisely 2 minutes of passive recovery. They stopped moving entirely. Finally, the session ended with a 10-minute cooldown.
I want to look closely at that bout structure because playing intensely for 8 minutes and then resting for 2 sounds an awful lot like high-intensity interval training.
Functionally, that is exactly what it is. The 8-minute bout forces the body to rapidly toggle between different energy systems. When a player sprints for a loose ball, they are relying heavily on the anaerobic lactic system, so they're burning stored ATP and phosphocreatine for immediate explosive energy. But then, when they are jogging back on defense, the aerobic system is working frantically to replenish those energy stores and clear metabolic byproducts out of the blood.
And then that 2-minute rest comes in.
Yes, that 2-minute passive rest period allows the heart rate to drop just enough and the local muscle environment to clear enough acidity that the participant can maintain a really high quality of movement in the next bout. Over an 8-week period, this accumulates to just over 12 hours of total active play time.
But here is where the methodology gets a bit tricky to me. If I am in the one-on-one group, I am solely responsible for defending my opponent. I can literally never hide or rest on the court.
Very true.
Right. But if I am in the 3-on-3 group, I have 2 teammates. I can catch my breath while someone else handles the ball. So how do the researchers ensure the one-on-one players aren't just exhausted from having to cover the whole court by themselves?
That is, honestly, the most elegant part of the study design. The researchers did not simply put 2 people on a standard collegiate basketball court and tell them to play. They engineered the spatial constraints using a concept called relative playing area.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the one-on-one group played on a custom-sized court that measured exactly 70 square meters in total, which equates to 35 square meters of space per player.
Right.
The 3-on-3 group played on a larger custom court that was 210 square meters in total.
Which mathematically is still exactly 35 square meters per player.
Precisely. By fixing the relative playing area, they isolated the variable of the number of players. The physical space available to operate within remained constant across both groups.
Wow, that is incredibly smart.
Yeah, and furthermore, to force ongoing physiological adaptation, you can't just apply the exact same stimulus forever. The body adapts and it becomes efficient. So from weeks 5 through 8, the researchers doubled the spatial constraints. Both formats were expanded to afford 70 square meters per player.
So the players suddenly have twice as much ground to cover to defend their opponent or attack the basket. But the rules of the game haven't changed.
Correct.
The structural constraint naturally progresses the external load without anyone having to blow a whistle and tell them, to run faster.
Yes, exactly. They engineered a locomotor progression purely through geometry. And the internal load data shows it worked perfectly. Throughout these sessions, the participants' heart rates were averaging around 178 beats per minute.
178. That is near maximal effort for a sedentary young adult.
It's incredibly high, yeah.
Let's transition to the actual physiological outcomes then, because spending 12 cumulative hours operating at 178 beats per minute is going to force a massive biological response. Let's look at the engine room first. What actually happened to their cardiovascular capacity?
Okay, so the primary outcome measure was cardiorespiratory fitness, which was assessed via the 20-meter multi-stage fitness test. You probably know it as the beep test.
Oh yeah, the dreaded beep test from high school gym class.
The very same. It's actually a highly validated field test used to estimate maximal oxygen uptake, or VO2 max. Basically, the participants run continuously between two lines 20 meters apart, keeping pace with a beep that gets progressively faster. It tests exactly how long your aerobic and anaerobic systems can sustain an escalating workload,
Right.
and the improvements here were clinically staggering.
I have the data right here, and it's wild. The one-on-one group increased their total distance covered on the test by 29.1%. The three-on-three group increased their distance by an astonishing 35.3%. Meanwhile, the control group, who maintained their sedentary lives, saw essentially no change. They increased by a statistically insignificant 1.1%.
Yeah, and to contextualize that, a 35% improvement in aerobic capacity in just 8 weeks is a massive architectural upgrade to the cardiovascular system.
It really is.
We are not just talking about the heart muscle getting a little stronger, we are looking at comprehensive systemic adaptations. At a cellular level, their muscle tissues have likely undergone mitochondrial biogenesis.
Which is what exactly?
It's an increase in the size and number of mitochondria, which are basically the energy-producing factories of the cells. Simultaneously, the body is building denser capillary networks around the muscle fibers to deliver oxygenated blood more efficiently. Even the heart's left ventricle adapts to pump a larger volume of blood with every single beat.
That's incredible. And obviously, sustaining that kind of metabolic engine requires an immense amount of energy.
Right.
Which brings us to the anthropometric data, the physical changes to their body composition.
Right.
The one-on-one group experienced a 6.8% decrease in total body mass. The three-on-three group saw an 8.2% decrease. But the really telling metric was the sum of their skin fold thicknesses, which is a very reliable clinical measure of subcutaneous body fat.
Yes, it is.
That metric dropped by roughly 10 to 12% across the experimental groups.
And what is absolutely vital for you to understand here is that these reductions in adiposity occurred entirely independent of dietary intervention.
Wait, really?
Yes, the researchers specifically instructed the participants to maintain their normal eating habits.
So they didn't put them on a caloric deficit at all. The sheer metabolic cost of the game itself just burned off the fat.
Yeah, and it is not just the calories burned during the 32 minutes of active play. It relates to a physiological phenomenon known as excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC.
EPOC, right?
When you repeatedly spike your heart rate to 178 beats per minute through intense bursts of sprinting and jumping, you significantly disrupt the body's homeostasis. After the game is over, the body has to expend a considerable amount of energy simply to restore oxygen levels, clear circulating lactate, repair micro tears in the muscle tissue, and bring the core temperature back down.
Oh, I see.
This elevated metabolic rate can persist for hours after the session concludes, pulling heavily on stored fat for fuel.
It makes complete sense. If your body is a car, this isn't just a fresh coat of paint.
Yeah.
In just 24 hours of total active playtime over 2 months, these women effectively upgraded their cardiovascular engines by a third.
That's a great way to put it.
And upgrading the cardiovascular engine aligns perfectly with the metabolic demands of running a basketball court. But when we look at the secondary outcomes, what we might call the chassis of the vehicle, the adaptations move from the cardiovascular system to the neuromuscular system. And this is where the biomechanics become incredibly interesting.
Indeed, because the researchers also measured structural power through vertical jump height and standing long jump distance. Both training groups saw significant enhancements here. The one-on-one group improved their vertical jump by 11%, and the three-on-three group improved by 14.1%.
Which is crazy to me. What is the biological mechanism driving that? Because they weren't doing squats or deadlifts?
No, they weren't. The mechanism is a fundamental property of human movement called the stretch shortening cycle.
Okay, how does that work?
Think of the tendons in your lower legs, particularly the Achilles tendon, like incredibly thick rubber bands. When a basketball player sprints forward and suddenly plants their foot to stop or change direction, that eccentric loading stretches the rubber band, storing kinetic energy. A fraction of a second later, as they explode upward for a rebound or laterally to cut past a defender, the muscle contracts concentrically and the rubber band snaps back, releasing that stored energy.
So by playing basketball, they are repeatedly subjecting their legs to hundreds of these rapid, high-force loading events.
Correct. It acts as this organic, unweighted form of plyometric training. Over 8 weeks, the nervous system becomes vastly more efficient at recruiting the necessary motor units simultaneously. The tendons themselves can stiffen and remodel to handle higher loads, allowing for a much faster rate of force development. They are essentially teaching their nervous system to fire a stronger, more synchronized signal to the lower body musculature.
That makes perfect sense for the legs, considering all the running and jumping. But hold on, because as I was looking through the data tables in this study, one specific metric stopped me dead.
Let me guess, the grip strength.
Yes. I need to push back on this because it seems physically impossible given the intervention. Wait, let me stop you there. Left and right hand grip strength increased by anywhere from 25.7% to a whopping 42.8%.
Massive.
They were just playing basketball, not lifting weights.
Yeah.
How does throwing a ball increase grip strength by over 40%?
I know. It is a phenomenal finding, and it highlights a concept called neuromuscular irradiation and the principle of the upper kinetic chain.
Neuromuscular irradiation.
Yeah. So hand grip strength is actually a universally recognized proxy in clinical science for overall systemic strength and central nervous system integrity. You are right that they were not lifting barbells. But consider the physical reality of a competitive small-sided game. When you catch a high-velocity pass, your hands have to exert immediate, immense isometric force to stop the ball's momentum.
Right.
When an opponent tries to strip the ball from you, you are clamping down with maximum grip tension.
But is gripping a ball really enough resistance to cause a 40% adaptation? It seems so high.
Well, it is not just the hands. When you engage in physical contact like boxing out for a rebound or absorbing a bump from a defender, your entire upper body instinctively braces. Your core tightens, your lats engage, your shoulders stabilize. These are sudden, high-tension isometric exposures.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
The central nervous system registers this demand for stability and responds by increasing its baseline ability to recruit muscle fibers across the entire upper kinetic chain. So when these women sat down to squeeze the hand grip dynamometer during the post-test, their brains were structurally capable of sending a much more intense, synchronized neural drive to their forearms and hands.
Wow.
It proves that raw strength isn't just about the size of a muscle. It is heavily dictated by the neurological efficiency cultivated through complex, forceful movements.
The interconnection of the body's systems is truly wild. So if we look at the comparison between the two formats, one-on-one versus three-on-three, the data shows that both are highly potent stimuli. But if someone is listening to this and wants to know the absolute optimal approach, does the science differentiate between the two?
This is where the researchers move from their primary confirmatory data into exploratory analysis. When they statistically compared the final results of the two experimental groups directly against each other, they found that the three-on-three format produced slightly larger exploratory gains in explosive leg power.
Specifically, the vertical jump and the standing long jump.
Exactly.
But why would the presence of 4 additional people on the court make you jump higher?
It likely comes down to how player density alters the movement profile. In a one-on-one game, the spatial geometry dictates a highly localized, dense physical battle. You are basically always within a few feet of your sole opponent.
Yeah, you're just kind of mirroring them.
Right. The movement consists of short, choppy steps, constant pivoting, and immediate rotational resistance. But in a three-on-three game, the tactical environment expands. You have cooperative spacing. Players must execute off-ball movement, meaning they are making longer, unimpeded sprints to cut to the basket or close out on a shooter on the perimeter.
I see.
This requirement for longer horizontal propulsion and high-speed transition running likely places a greater emphasis on explosive lower body mechanics.
So the tactical demands of teamwork physically change the angles and velocities of how the body moves through space.
Exactly.
But we should be very clear about the scientific boundaries of this study, right?
Oh, absolutely. Scientific rigor demands we acknowledge the limitations. As we noted, while the body composition changed, the participants' diets and their free-living physical activity outside the lab were not strictly monitored or controlled. Furthermore, this was a single-site study focusing entirely on a very specific demographic of sedentary females between 18 and 21. We cannot universally extrapolate these exact percentage gains to, say, a 50-year-old active male.
Of course.
And most importantly, while the jumping data showed a signal favoring three-on-three, the direct statistical comparisons between the two formats for the aerobic beep test and the hand grip strength were not significantly different.
So applying this to the listener's life, if they're putting together a recreational game this weekend with the goal of getting fit, which format should they actually choose?
The pragmatic takeaway is that the physiological benefits are remarkably robust across both formats. Both are highly effective. The choice should really be dictated by your logistical constraints and your psychological preferences.
Okay, so how should they decide?
If your primary goal is unending, unrelenting physical engagement where your heart rate never has a chance to settle and you only have access to a small patch of driveway, one-on-one is highly effective. But choose three-on-three if you want social interaction, teamwork, and perhaps slightly more horizontal transition work for that lower limb power. The fundamental mechanism hiding intense interval training inside a cognitive puzzle works brilliantly either way.
It's just such a smart way to approach fitness.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which leads to a final, broader implication that this research uncovers. I want you to think about this. If manipulating a few arbitrary constraints, like drawing a 35 square meter box on the ground and limiting the number of people inside it, can completely rewire human cardiovascular capacity, strip away body fat, and radically upgrade neuromuscular power in just 8 weeks.
Yeah.
We have to ask ourselves how the physical rules and spatial constraints of our daily environments are affecting us. Think about the physical dimensions of your office cubicle, the posture forced upon you by the geometry of your car during a commute, or the layout of your living room.
Oh, wow. Hadn't thought of it like that.
We are in a constant state of biological adaptation to the environments we build. Our modern infrastructure is essentially a massive, unconsciously designed, small-sided game. And right now, the rules of that game are optimizing us for sedentarism. They are silently shaping our biology without us even realizing it.
That is a profound perspective. The constraints of our environment are always programming our biology, whether we realize it or not. But the incredible optimism of this study is that we retain the power to change those constraints whenever we want. A painted line and a ball are enough to revert the damage.
Absolutely.
To summarize our deep dive today, modifying the rules of a simple basketball game provides a scientifically validated, highly effective, and psychologically engaging strategy to drive massive cardiovascular and neuromuscular improvements. It proves that the best exercise is the one your brain doesn't realize it's doing.
Couldn't have said it better.
We strongly encourage you to seek out the full article in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine to explore the precise statistical modeling, the complete anthropometric tables, and the exact methodology the researchers utilized. It is an outstanding template for practical exercise science.
Highly recommend it.
And if you found this analysis valuable, please follow the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next scientifically rigorous deep dive into the research that shapes our understanding of the human body. Until next time, take a hard look at your environment and go change your constraints.